A lot of the problems with ingredients out there, it's not necessarily the ingredient itself, it's the contaminants that are a byproduct of their processing.
Welcome to the Learn Skin podcast with me, Dr. Raja.
And me, Dr. Hadar, where we discuss all things skin.
Join us as we delve into the art and science of skin health in today's episode.
Hey, Raja, can you say the thing I told you to tell them?
Of course. We are board-certified dermatologists. This podcast is meant for educational and informational purposes only and is not considered medical advice, nor does it serve as a substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. All opinions shared do not express the views of Learn Health, Inc. Let's get to the good stuff.
Hey, Raja, how are you today?
Hey, Hadar, I'm doing pretty well. You know, I've been thinking more and more, especially with the season into the new year, 2024, and it kind of starts off a bit cold, right? We need the right moisturizers, the right kind of skin products. That's what I've been thinking about.
No, I know. And today in this episode, we specifically want to talk about skincare, but some of our listeners will say, hey, Raja, Hadar, what's new? What are you talking about? Well, to me, I personally really inspired by our guest because every now and then you meet a person in medicine. We have a lot of great people in medicine, but then you go outside and talk to industry folks and you meet these people who have an unbelievable story of really trying to make a difference on their own and building quite literally an empire from scratch. So today we want to be inspired by this story and of course lead into science with that, which I find also very intriguing and a story that weaves in both the personal and the professional and the science. So this sounds like a great Learn Skin podcast in the making. Shall we get started?
Oh yeah, let's get right into it. So, we are joined by Jessica Iclisoy, and she is CEO and founder of California Baby. And we just want to also make it a point that, they are sponsoring this podcast and we're going to be talking science, but this whole story with starting this company and then the ethos behind it, it's going to be very interesting. Just to give a little background before we have you start talking to us, Jessica, is that you really embarked on a journey, create a non-toxic environment for a family. She wanted to really understand how can we bring the right kind of products to market that have preservatives and they have ingredients that are safer for us. And there's a lot of hidden things in this whole process of making products. And I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. But she's been recognized in the magazine's annual Self-Made Women list from 2017 to 2022, host of the California Natural Living podcast. So Jessica, welcome to the podcast. This isn't just a product or isn't just a skin line. This is really a passion and your desire to really change the conversation, isn't it?
Yes. Thank you for having me, guys. I really appreciate it. Yeah, California Baby is more than a business. It's a business, but really it's a mission. It's my life's mission. And it started when I was a new mom. I had just had my first son and I was cleaning up my lifestyle the way, a lot of moms do, no coffee, no wine. And then I took it a little bit further. I was cleaning up I looked at every part of my home. And I came upon my son's shampoo that I had bought at a health food store, thinking this is going to be the very best. And I had received a conventional shampoo as a gift for my baby shower. And I happened upon a chemical dictionary in the library, and I started looking up the ingredients and compared them and found that they were basically the same, with a lot of ingredients that were listed as known carcinogens or potential carcinogens. And that's really what set me off on my journey of skincare. I was not intending to start a business. I was kind of PO'd. I was kind of pissed off, and I wanted to solve a problem.
Yeah, don't mess with a mom who's on a mission. Absolutely. I do have to say, though, Jessica, that most moms stop at the idea of cleaning their body, which I see a lot. But it's the rare mom that actually owns or goes to find a chemical dictionary. So there has to be something more to that, right? So was there something in your background, or what were those next steps that led you from being a PO mom to all the way to being a successful CEO for a company featured on NBC and other outlets and on with all this success? What was that difference maker?
I call it the mama bear instinct. And also guys out there whose wives maybe haven't, you haven't had kids yet. I always say to men, like, she's going to change. And, you guys may have seen that too. But, women change when they have their babies because, now we're in charge of this little helpless baby and the instincts, kick in. And so, yeah, you're right. I do take it farther than most. That's probably, should go on my bio, takes it farther than most.
That's a good one.
And, again, I wasn't trying to start a business, but the more I dug into it, the more I just couldn't let it go. And so, one thing led to another. And once I started researching ingredients, and then I thought to myself, what would I do if I made a fantasy product? So again, I was just in the fantasy mode. And so I started mixing and making a shampoo in my kitchen on my stove. And after 3 years of research and development, I cold called a chemist who was in Jersey. I was in LA. And he, walked me through the process of, how to make a shampoo. I went to UCLA, used the library, PubMed, and I started, trying to find alternatives to, number one was sodium lauryl sulfate, synthetic fragrances, preservatives, these things that were listed as known carcinogens. So I thought, well, let me find alternatives to those. And I actually did find them. I found a cleanser that I imported from Germany. And instead of using synthetic fragrances, I scented the products with pure essential of lavender, French lavender. And so, it turns out that I had a product. And I actually then I walked into my local health food store and said, look, this product is so different than, what you have on the shelf. I started explaining to them. And, this was 30 plus years ago, like 34 years ago. So this was before this whole naturals boom, organics boom. So it was very, very new. And they said to me, okay, we'll carry your product. Turns out the health food store was purchased by Whole Foods. And that was my first customer. And now I was in business. I
Wow.
didn't expect to be in business, but now I was.
And so, what are those core principles that you put together? Because I know you're very particular on these principles moving forward. So, even 30 years later, what are those still core principles that you think are so key to putting together a good product?
Yeah, and you're right. They are core principles that I founded the company on, and they are still core principles for us today. And, it has to be good for the family. It has to be healthy. It cannot damage. People will say to me, I actually there was a customer yesterday who was using our eczema products, and he was like, I can't believe it. Like in one day, it started clearing up my eczema. And I said, really, your body did that. Our products just kind of got out of the way and it wasn't damaging you. It wasn't damaging your skin, and it just allowed you and supported your body in healing itself. So the core principle that we have at California Baby is, what is that? The Hippocratic Oath. I'm not a doctor, so correct me if I'm wrong, but first do no harm. And so that's what we do. We're making sure that the ingredients, number one, are not damaging or toxic to humans and the environment. So those are the two core principles. They can't hurt people, and they have to be biodegradable and or non-toxic in that way. That's like number one. If I'm formulating a product, and the way I formulate the products, I'm looking for alternatives. So let's say, for instance, if there's a hair detangler, most hair detanglers contain silicones. Those can have some health implications. Or a hair gel many hair gels contain silicones. And so I will look for alternatives. My job is to look for the alternative to that, but still have the functionality that, customers expect. And so that's really what we do. So for instance, our hair gel won't have silicones. We use starches. So we use cornstarch, tapioca starch. It's not going to hold your hair as aggressively. So you're not going to be a punk rocker with ours, but it's going to do it's going to do the job. And it's also not going to poison you in the process. That's a core principle.
Excellent. Now, I know that it is interesting because obviously the company has grown significantly since those days cooking on the kitchen stove. And now it's a big corporation, a lot of products being sold, and you're kind of sitting at the top of the pyramid. But
Mm-hmm.
I do know that you still insist on finding those right safe ingredients. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe you have a farm where you grow some of these ingredients. So you kind of really carefully source some of these products, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that really, again, grew out of necessity. We have such a limited palette because a lot of the ingredients don't exist that we need to use, and or the market just isn't there. So one of the things that we keep coming back to is like, well, we're just going to have to do it ourselves. And that was part of purchasing a farm. We grow many of our own botanicals. We do our own extractions. And then this way we can ensure quality, from seed to bottle. And, there's a lot of steps that go into it. People would be surprised. And so every step is important. Every step of the chain is important because, let's say, for instance, if you have a conventional product and the ingredients in there, they may be going through 15, 20 stops in the process of making that ingredient, and you have a chance for contamination. And I'm not just talking bacterial contamination, I'm talking about, chemical byproducts that are building up. So a lot of the problems with ingredients out there, it's not necessarily the ingredient itself, it's the contaminants that are a byproduct of their processing. So I'm really into how the ingredient is processed. Don't tell me what it does, right? So it's the opposite of if somebody comes and wants to sell me an ingredient and they say, oh, it's anti-aging and it's this. And I don't want to hear any of that. We can talk about that later. What I want to know is what process are you using? Because that tells me how toxic the ingredient is. And that's where my interest lies.
Jessica, can you talk a little bit more about, because, now that we're on the topic of ingredient toxicity,
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of us maybe take it as fact that, we don't even think about the process. We just think about, oh, is this ingredient inherently toxic or not, if it's in or it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
But can you talk about how the process might change the end product or what can get introduced as part of the process? Can
Mm-hmm.
you speak more about that?
Yeah, because it is a big part of it, and it affects the price. It's usually affects the price. So many of these ingredients that contain these contaminants, that are like kind of catch a ride in the ingredient process. One very common ingredient processing is called ethoxylation. So it's a process that uses petroleum, and all the contaminants from the petroleum stay in that ingredient. Now, that can be scrubbed out, meaning like companies can remove those contaminants, but that's extra steps and that's extra money. And so most companies don't do that. So, could we have cleaner, and that's such a loaded word, but can we have cleaner ingredients, even if they're not natural? Could we take a synthetic ingredient and make it safer by removing these contaminants? Yes, but that doesn't happen because then it's going to make it very expensive. And when you have companies who are competing on price, you guys know that, they're just not going to do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that you even gave me an example of something as simple as the water that you
Uh-huh.
use can make a big difference, right? I mean, I know I always joke for people who come from outside of the US, who grew up outside the US, such as myself, and we take foods that we would think are so simple, like bread, right? And we say, oh, it's made the same
Right,
way, and still it
right,
doesn't
right.
taste the same. And everybody says, and I don't know if it's an urban myth or it's true, but everybody says, oh, it's the water. The water's different. Even that ingredient, as simple as that, can make a big difference, right?
Actually, in skincare, I believe it makes all the difference because your
Huh.
water is going to dictate how you make the product, right? So if the water is the dirtiest part of the process, right? So it's very important that, we filter our water, right? We drink filtered water. We know that water has bacteria, it has fungi, it has a lot of things in it. So at California Baby, we're so obsessive about our water. We have a 4-step water purification process. And we do that because if we start with a very clean base, which water is the base of cosmetics, unless it's anhydrous, meaning it doesn't have water and it's just oils and waxes, but shampoos, lotions, all the things that feel really good, that feel good when you put it on your skin have water in it. Now, if you're not obsessed about water the way we are, then what companies are doing is they're dousing their products with antimicrobials to kill all that stuff, right? So that's why preservatives are so irritating. They're in there at high levels, and they're in there really not to preserve the product, but to make up for the dirty manufacturing process. So at California Baby, we first go through a reverse osmosis. It goes through 2 stages of UV light. And then when it goes into the tank, to make the product, we pasteurize the water. So that would kill any lingering, bacteria or fungi. And what is pasteurization? We have to take it up to about like 150 degrees Fahrenheit, hold it there for 30 minutes, and then we have to bring it back down to a temperature that we can actually make products with. And, that's a couple hour process. And so most manufacturer companies, so California Baby, we make it ourselves. We make every single one of our products, so we can do that. But most companies are using contract manufacturers, and there is no way they're going to be doing that. They're not going to be waiting 2 hours for the water to heat up and cool down. And then that limits the time that you can actually make the product. And they want to make 3-4 batches a day, not one batch a day like we do.
Jessica, you touched on something that I really want to talk a little bit more about, which is, how products are made. So we know that there's an ingredient like sourcing pipeline, and a lot of people think about like where are people getting the source. And sometimes I think what we might not realize is if you go through a contract manufacturer, many people will do that, sometimes to get up and off the ground. But eventually I feel like companies start to bring that in-house. And probably it's because if you work with a contract manufacturer, you have to know them really well, understand their process really well, because sometimes they might replace even an ingredient that you got from one source with another one just to kind of fill the gap.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then that might totally change the nature of the safety pipeline that was done with this ingredient, or how it might have been extracted, or how it got to it. Because I think a lot of us don't realize, like, for example, if you put an extract of an herb in there, it's not the same if you get them from 2 different sources, because there is going to be some difference in how, that source used it or whatnot. So I really appreciate your point about the fact that the more steps you control, then you truly have control.
Yes. And you just touched on really the dirty secret in the cosmetics business with contract manufacturers is that, you might specify a certain ingredient, but you're not stirring the pot. And also, you're not ordering the ingredients. So they can very easily switch out. And it's very common to do it. And many times, they'll do it for cost. But let's say they're not doing that. Let's say they, are up and up and, they want to do the right thing. But if you specify witch hazel, for instance, I want to have witch hazel in this toner, and, they are going to go to the open market and buy it unless you are specifically ordering it, making sure it was delivered, making sure that they're using that ingredient. And usually that is not the case. So, that's just, hey, be aware of that. So if somebody's going to start a skincare line and they're like, well, I specified this and that and this and that, and there's plenty of cases out there where plenty of lawsuits that you could look up where they're pointing fingers, where the brand says, well, but we didn't specify that. And so the contract manufacturer, they fooled us, or they switched out an ingredient on us. So it's their fault. And then, you know what I mean? The fingers start pointing, but it's like you go to a restaurant, you don't know how they make the food. But you know how you make it at home, you know the ingredients and you know all of that. So that's why at California Baby, we have to make our own products. And that's the only way we can guarantee that it is what we say it is.
Now, I know that, Jessica, you were talking about what is being said to the public and how various companies are trying, even if they do their best, sometimes they can't even control the supply chain. Despite their best effort, it's very difficult. And
Right.
I think this brings out kind of the issue of marketing and how you put a product out there. And I think you've been very vocal on the issue of greenwashing. I think it's something that you're very passionate about. Can you tell us, what does that mean and how does that affect the client out there, the person wanting to buy something?
Yeah, it's greenwashing and now it's clean washing, right? So,
Yes.
and, the reason I'm vocal about it is because I do feel like people should be able to make a choice and receive the choice that they made, right? So, I'm not saying that everybody should live a certain way, but the people who want to buy, and there are some people, who are immune compromised, they're going through chemotherapy, or they have to have what you say is on the label, or they can't have those contaminants. And so it's just really unfair that they think, number one, they're paying more for it. Okay, so that's the number one thing on greenwashing and cleanwashing is that they're promising you, first of all, what does clean mean? We don't even know that. We could go into a whole, subject on that. That's just a marketing term. Greenwashing is making it seem like it is more natural, and it's just the marketing puffery that is used to get a customer to spend more and not delivering on that promise. And this is really what spurred me to start California Baby, because one ingredient on the shampoo that I bought from my health food store had an ingredient labeled natural fragrance. Now, I don't know about you, but to me, natural fragrance sounds real safe and good. But really, all it is, it's a synthetic fragrance that smells like something in nature. So it's not a plant material. It's just a
Huh.
natural fragrance. And
Right. I
now
guess you could understand it both ways, right? If you're just listening to the language. But
right,
you're right. The inclination is to think, oh, the ingredient itself is natural. But you're saying, no, no, no. We're only saying that it smells like something natural.
exactly, exactly. And if you're
That's a nice
buying
trick.
it, it's a great trick. And if you're buying it in a health food store,
I mean, honestly, natural has no meaning right
right?
now. There are some definitions that are now starting to emerge, maybe out of Europe. And then there's a natural, I think they're trying to get an official thing, but right now anybody can use the word natural. It's just like clean. What does
Mm-hmm.
clean mean?
It means nothing. And,
Yeah.
there are a lot of like seals out there, from environmental groups or even retailers now. If you go into certain retailers, they'll put their own seal, like, and they're making it, they're giving it, kind of like, oh, this is clean, this is green, this is natural. Well, unless it's a federal regulation like organic, organic is a federal regulation that has real consequences. It has the guidelines. You follow these guidelines and you're allowed to use a seal. Then it's just marketing. So unless it's a federal regulation, even if it's coming out of Europe, they're ahead of us in terms of ingredient safety. But still, if it's not coming from the government or from a federal regulation, it's just marketing. We have to understand that marketing, even in the United States, there's an actual term, it's a legal term called puffery. You're allowed to talk about your products to a certain extent. Like you can say, oh, this cream is going to make you look like you're floating on the moon. But, we understand you're not going to float on the moon. We understand that's puffery, that's classic puffery. And we understand that they're just zhushing it up. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're not talking about this is clean, this is natural, this is better for you.
So, Jessica, I know that you're not just talk to talk, you walk the
Mm-hmm.
walk. You found an organization called the Natural Advisory Council. I know you participated in some really strong lobbying on the Hill, trying to get some legislation
Mm-hmm.
across. Can you tell us about some of the successes you had there and maybe some of the challenges still out there so the public can maybe try to help?
Okay, here are the number of successes I've had lobbying in Washington, D.C. Zero. Zero.
Oh my God. I don't know if to cry or to laugh. Okay.
Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to stop trying, and that doesn't mean that it won't happen at some point. And it doesn't really have anything to do with Washington, D.C., because it really has to do with these companies who went out and started using the word clean. So all the companies that use the word clean were in D.C. also trying to come up with legislation, and they were the very ones who were trying to dumb it down because they knew they couldn't reach it. So they came up with this marketing term called clean. So I was working with those very companies, and it wasn't even like the congressman or the Senate, it wasn't even them who were the problem. It was my peers.
Huh.
So it's a matter of just gaining consensus on that. It was very dispiriting for me, I have to say. Like I went there like, okay, we're going to do this and we're going to, and we're all, and you can get things down on paper, and we did. And then they start, oh, but we can't do this, and then we can't do that. So it's a matter of just, going back and trying again and working with the right people. But all these people who are using the word clean are the ones who really don't want to have legislation, because then they will now be held to
To a
regulations
standard, right? To a
and a
certain standard,
standard.
right?
Now they can say whatever they want. They're actually successful in what they're doing, because what's happening right now is, there are class action lawsuits. You could Google them. There's some class action lawsuits against some major retailers who are clean washing. And so we'll see what happens, from that.
Well, Jessica, thank you so much. This has been really a tour de force, starting from your moments with your baby, really trying to cook up a good shampoo for
Yeah.
your son, all the way to building a small little empire with
Mhm.
a beautiful farm where you grow your ingredients, and
Yeah.
dreaming about going to the hill and making a difference. I mean, I think this is really a true American story, starting from the personal and then moving out to betterment of your community. I think it's a wonderful story and a wonderful product to boot.
Jessica, what kind of products do you make? Maybe you can just give us an overview of the kind of products that you make, what people can find at California Baby, and how do they find them?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. So if you go to californiababy.com, you'll find the full array. We have over 200 products. Amazon.com is another great one. But we have really everything in every category. The only thing we don't have are wipes, because environmentally, I think they're a disaster. But shampoo, conditioner, mineral-based sunscreen, diaper care, lotions, creams, our calendula cream, you mentioned our farm. And that's really our superstar product, because we grow the calendula, which is a little pot marigold flower that has been used for centuries to soothe the skin. So, we have a whole line of that. We really have everything that you need in the skincare products, and then we'll continue to expand throughout the house. And we have some pet products. Oh, that's the other thing that's really interesting, is that we came out with California Fur Baby, because, pets are
People
really,
really care about the safety of their pets too. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
thanks for being thoughtful on that.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got everything. Check out californiababy.com. That's a great, and we also have a lot of information there. We've got a blog that, kind of supports what we do.
That's amazing. And the name does make sense. And as we were saying, taking the story from this California baby that was born into a protective mom who pulled out the chemical dictionary, went all the way to having a company with a little farm in the backyard to grow everything, to your advocacy on the Hill, trying to really improve your community all around.
Yeah.
So thank you very much, Jessica. I know this is just the beginning of the conversation, and I'm looking forward to expanding it with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you for your interest. I really appreciate it, because, you guys are docs and you're talking to patients, and it's really important that we are aware, at the very least, aware of what we're putting on our skin.
Thank you. Folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you enjoy learning about integrative dermatology, we want to fill you in on a little secret. It does not have to stop here.
That's correct. You should become a premium member.
A premium member? Hey, Raja, tell us, what does that mean?
Well, we have a private community at Learn Skin for practitioners who want to learn more and connect even more closely with like-minded colleagues.
That's correct. This is something that we have developed over the years based on what we wished we learned in training. Not only do you get a discount to the annual Integrative Dermatology Symposium, but you also get exclusive access to content that is not available to the public, and a private online community to network and engage with.
So don't wait. Together, we can advance patient care. Join us as a premium member today, and let's get integrated.